Horror movies are having a moment. Truth is, horror seems to always be having a moment. It's the one genre that doesn't need stars or massive budgets to get people into seats. In this video, we'll discuss the story structure of horror films using two recent masterpieces, Midsommar and Get Out. Horror typically fits 3-act structure, but there are also patterns that are specific to the horror genre that may be useful for anyone looking to write or produce a horror film. Here's the map of story structure based on Sid Field's paradigm, with a couple of tweaks that I find useful. You can download this at a link in the description and use it to outline your own projects. We're here to talk specifically how a certain type of slow burn horror works within 3-act structure. At the end, we'll discuss how if you look at the structure backwards, you get a map of the theme and the film reveals its meaning. Let's start with the opening image. The opening image sets the tone for the film. In Get Out, we open on a desolate suburb. This isn't our usual setting for a horror movie, but the barrenness of the landscape and the tension our character feels creates an unease. When he is taken, we get our first glimpse of horror.
Yo! Yo!
Ari Aster's Midsommar starts on a mural. On first viewing, it seems rather innocuous, but on a second viewing of the film, it is apparent this mural tells us the story we are about to see. Now we are in Act 1. This is where we are introduced to the main character and the world they live in. To make a strong horror movie, you've got to give us characters we love and then put them in a horrible situation and watch them find a way out. Or not. In Get Out, we meet Chris, a photographer. He's dating Rose, and she's invited him home to meet her parents. In Midsommar, we meet our protagonist, Danny. She's stuck in an unrewarding relationship with her boyfriend, who's secretly considering ending the relationship. But his plans are derailed when he finds out Danny's sister has committed suicide and taken her parents with her. In both cases, the writer has begun their story by creating empathy for the protagonists.
Hey. Danny. Babe.
Blake Snyder calls this the save the cat moment. And this is where his book gets its name. His idea is your character must do something good in order to make us love them. But just as effective as saving the cat is to shit on the hero. It's just as strong to do something awful to your hero or make them the underdog. Danny's life is devastated and we feel for her. We have sympathy for Chris because he's about to undergo this awkward experience of meeting his girlfriend's in-laws, who might not accept him because of his skin color. Both stories place their characters in the position of the underdog. Now that we've built empathy for the hero and set up the story, something will happen to them that sets them on a journey. This is the inciting incident. The inciting incident is the first moment where the protagonist faces the conflict. In Get Out, Chris is heading to meet his girlfriend's white parents, and they hit a deer. The cops arrive on the scene and treat our hero like he does not belong in the neighborhood. The deer is an omen and evokes Chris's memory of his mother's death. It also introduces the threat of the police. In Midsommar, Florence Pugh's character Danny gets the offer to go to the Midsommar festival. Much to her boyfriend's chagrin, she accepts.
So, Sweden.
Yeah.
You're coming, right?
I mean, I guess so. That's not completely ruining your guys' plans.
Oh,
No,
not at all.
No.
Both films work as a slow burn horror. They take their time to get to the point where there is any type of violence. So the inciting incident only hints at the horror to come. In his book, The Philosophy of Horror, Noel Carroll explores the patterns of horror. Horror at its heart deals with the taboo subjects, that which the audience is not willing to face. Act 1. A horror is hinted at, but only the audience knows the danger is coming. The protagonist feels something is wrong but cannot act on it. They must keep moving, going where the story is pushing them, assuming that the awful feeling in their gut is just a feeling because the truth that they will eventually meet with is too awful to imagine. Chris feels something is wrong, but he must be polite to his girlfriend's weirdo family. Danny has a vision that something is not right with her boyfriend or this festival, but she is thousands of miles from home and she has no choice but to be polite and try to enjoy herself. Both characters ignore their gut instinct out of societal politeness. The taboo idea at the core of the horror is something we cannot face. While this structure will not match up with every horror movie ever made, you will find the pattern is common. You'll see it in films like The Exorcist, The Babadook, Speak No Evil, X, Hereditary, A Nightmare on Elm Street follows, and more. On the plot point 1, the horror becomes unavoidable, and the protagonist finds themselves stuck in a situation they cannot get out of. In a slow burn horror, the protagonist may understand the horror is happening to them, or not, as in the case of Midsommar, but the world around them will not accept or acknowledge the horror. Danny is given psychedelics and hallucinates in a field. It's the first hint that something is going on here.
You're okay. You're okay. You're okay.
In Get Out, Chris is hypnotized and dropped into the sunken place. Now we know officially our hero is in a horror movie, but it's a slow burn, so they can't accept it. Chris confronts Rose and tells her that her mother hypnotized him. Something is not right here, but he can't leave. The societal need for politeness and proper behavior keeps him from leaving. Despite her discomfort, Danny has to grin and bear, no pun intended, the strange customs of the Midsommar festival. Now in the first half of Act 2, the protagonist is slowly coming to realize the danger they are in. On the midpoint, the protagonist realizes the horror is real, and there is only one more thing to do.
Get out. Sorry, man.
Okay.
Get out! Yo!
After the midpoint, the protagonist is running from the threat, actively trying to survive. Chris takes the advice of Lakeith Stansfield and does what most protagonists in horror fail to do. He tries to run. Danny, having witnessed the true nature of the culture she has been invited to, does whatever she can to leave. The midpoint ups the ante, making the second half of the movie escalate until the terror reaches its peak. This is the all is lost moment, aka plot point 2. Danny, having tried everything to leave, finds herself stuck, waiting for the festival to begin. Her friends are murdered. There's no more doubt here. This festival is up to no good, and they will play their parts in the ritual. Chris takes Eddie Murphy's advice, and he gets out.
Too bad we can't stay, baby.
But is cornered by the family and double-crossed by his girlfriend. He finds himself strapped to a chair, about to have his brain implanted into the guy from Office Space. The hopeless moment. Things need to be as bad as it can get. Causing the audience to wonder what will happen next. To wonder how the protagonist can get out of this impossible situation. This breaks the story into Act 3. In Act 3, we watch our character having failed to avoid the fate that has befallen them at the mercy of the monster. Danny, trapped in the cult's final ceremony, is crowned May Queen. She is guided through a process of grief where she mourns the loss of her family surrounded by the women of the village. This is a direct contradiction to her boyfriend's guidance. Stop dwelling on the negative emotion. The cult has monstrous and violent rituals, but they face grief and emotion in a way her boyfriend is not capable of. She must make a decision. Who will be crowned king? This is her change moment. She's overcome the lie. She picks her boyfriend, dooming him to a final, horrible fate. In Get Out, Chris finds a way out of the chair and fights his way out of the house, but he must confront his ghost before the story will let him leave. Seeing Georgetta stuck and believing she is like him, an innocent prisoner trapped by the family, he goes back to save her. He is redeeming his past failure to save his mother. It doesn't work out and she attacks, but he's able to overcome her and finally take on Rose. On the verge of killing Rose, a police car approaches. The audience knows what is coming. It is a callback to the horrific trick ending of the first famous horror classic to feature a black protagonist, Night of the Living Dead, and plays with the genre's tendency to end in tragedy. We think he's going to be killed, but instead the ending is subverted. It is his friend in the TA car, not a cop car. He flees the scene, saved. The resolution? It is an upending. Danny watches as her boyfriend is placed in a bearskin and burned to death. Both films skip the denouement. We don't need to see their lives after the events of the story. We instead are left with one final image. The closing image may rhyme with the opening. Placed side to side with the opening, we will see how the hero has been transformed by the story. It is a significant and memorable image. Danny, watching her boyfriend burn, smiles. She's finally letting go of the relationship. In Get Out, the two friends drive away into the night. We're not done yet. Now let's look at the story backwards, where the controlling idea will be revealed. The controlling idea, a little bit more specific than the theme, is something that Robert McKee talks about in Story. The controlling idea is the statement the film makes within its structure. In the end, Danny is smiling. She's overcome her need to preserve the relationship. She has changed. Now let's go back to see how her flaw is established earlier in the film. In the scene where she is led to process her emotions, she learns what a real caring person is capable of. We move backwards into the story. Her boyfriend tells her the opposite of what she needs to hear. He tells her she needs to get over it, stop wallowing in grief. Pell tells her the truth she needs to hear. He also lost his family when he was young. But when his parents died, he was helped by a community that helped him through his grief.
Yet my difference is I never got the chance to feel lost because I had a family here where everyone embraced me and swept me up. And I was raised by a community that doesn't bicker over what's theirs and what's not theirs. That's what you were given. But I have always felt held. Danny, do you feel held by him? Does he feel like home to you?
We go back even further in the beginning of the film, a hint that the protagonist is off balance and must go on the journey to come to some new understanding. After the death of her parents, Danny steps into the bathroom and wails, alone, hiding her pain. In the first scenes, Danny, talking to her friend, is told the revelation the movie seeks to give her. You must let go of this relationship. Now let's look at the controlling idea of Get Out. At the end of Get Out, Chris is rescued by his friend who refused to let another brother be left behind. Let's move backwards. His big change moment. He goes back for Georgina, overcoming his ghost. Back even further, the TA goes to the cops, begging them to help his friend, but they ignore him, showing the example of the lie. They will not go back for their brother. Rewind even further, Chris tells the story of his mother's death, about how he let her go.
What did you do?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I just sat there.
Rod's actions save Chris and show us the argument the film makes. We must go back for those who have been left behind. In Stephen King's Danse Macabre, he talks about horror being a release valve, a place for the most horrific and taboo ideas to surface, just for a moment. Ideas repressed without a release valve cause the repressor to snap like Norman Bates under the oppressive upbringing of his psychotic mother. This is the power of horror. It allows taboo ideas to find expression. Midsommar deals with a taboo idea that maybe, just maybe, that barbaric culture you are so disgusted by might offer you more humanity than the so-called civilized one you come from. Get Out brings in the subtle racism of everyday America. It does so without raising the usual flags that any media dealing with race tends to do. In a world where every piece of media polarizes audiences, a movie that expressly dealt with race received little of the usual anger this kind of thing typically calls to itself. Horror is the place we go to deal with these uncomfortable ideas. At first, our hero is reluctant to accept it until the horror confronts them. Then they must find the others, make them believe. The horror exists and thrives on the power that no one believes it is real. This is essential to the genre. The horror grows until the protagonist is forced to take action before, and sometimes after, it is too late.
For more on story structure, check out this video.